Okay. Good evening, everyone. His Excellency will arrive shortly. We will start now. Please be seated. Okay. Good evening, and thank you very much. Professor Barak Medina, Rector of the Hebrew University. His Excellency Armenian Kapatyan, Ambassador of the Republic of Armenia to Israel, who will come soon, and I'll present him again. Mr. Tzolag Momojian, Honorary Consul of the Republic of Armenia in Jerusalem. The Very Reverend Father Korion Bagdasarian, Chancellor of the Armenian Patriarch of Jerusalem. Advocate Kevok Nabaldanian, late Judge, Regional Labor Court of Jerusalem. Mr. Christine Movasian, Chairperson, the Union of Armenian Communities in Israel. Professor Nissim Otmazgin, the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities. Professor Eli Richter. Esteemed lecturers, esteemed musicians and singers, the honored guests from the Hebrew University, the Armenian Community of Jerusalem, and elsewhere. I have the privilege to open this evening in remembrance of the genocide of the Armenian people in the Ottoman Empire, which reached its climax in 1915. We have come together to honor the memory of the victims of the Armenians in the Ottoman Empire, to remember the survivors, to venerate those who resisted, and to show our appreciation and respect for all who have worked over the generations to bring about the resurrection and flourishing of Armenian communities and culture around the world. It is only once in several years that the Armenian genocide is marked on the same week that we also mark Yom HaShoah. There is a close link between these two sacred days, and for us, the marking of one strengthens the significance of the other. Jews and Armenians have long been involved in rescue endeavors during the suffering of the other people. Already during the Armenian massacres of 1894-97, Anglo Jewry, in a research that I'm conducting now, aimed to humanitarianly help the suffering Armenians. As the Orthodox Jewish banker and liberal politician, Sir Samuel Montague expressed in front of a supportive Jewish crowd of the East End, and I quote, "It was now only proper that every Jew should stand forward," end of quote. This was followed by the words of Rabbi Zinger, who declared, and I quote, "Today Christians were persecuted, tomorrow it will be the turn of the Jews," end of the quote. Of course, it is the famous American ambassador of Turkey to Turkey, Henry Morgenthau, Sr., who exerted great efforts on behalf of the Armenians at the time of the genocide itself. Now, during the Holocaust, many Armenians risked their lives while saving Jews from Nazi hands. One of these heroes, who was also recognized as righteous among the nations, was Pran Tashian, who saved the children of the Goldberg family, the neighbors, at the city of Simferopol in Crimea. When asked about the motivation for heroic deed, Pran, who lost her first husband, 2 children, and most of her relatives during the Armenian genocide, answered that having, and I quote, "having witnessed the Armenian genocide, we decided to save them," end of quote. We are proud yet humbled at the same time to hold this annual commemorative event here at Mount Scopus, campus of the Hebrew University. On the one hand, we can be proud that the call for recognition of the Armenian genocide has for many years been sounded here at the Hebrew University. And as the years have gone by, ever higher officials in the university administration have joined us in this effort. It is a shame and embarrassment that in the same name of, or in the name of realpolitik, that the government of Israel has never recognized the Armenian genocide and called on the government of Turkey to take responsibility for the actions of its Ottoman predecessors. So, without further ado, let us start our program. I will leave the many facts for my final words, yet already now I would like, in the name of the members of the organizing committee, to express their profound gratitude to Mr. Tzolag Momojian, Honorary Consul of the Republic of Armenia in Jerusalem, for his long time, and I don't see him here. I think he, okay, so okay, I will express the words perhaps later when he'll be here. I think he went for the, okay. I would like first to call upon Professor Barak Medina, Rector of the Hebrew University, to convey his greetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Oded. Dear guests, colleagues, We gather here today to remember the genocide of more than 1 million Armenian men and women. These are people who were massacred because of their religion and ethnicity out of hatred. As in other instances of such atrocities, the massacre is not an isolated event. It is the culmination of many years of incitement against an ethnic minority, discrimination, and denial of rights. We at the Hebrew University view it as our duty to take part in the events of remembrance of the genocide of the Armenian people. As an institution that is located here in Jerusalem and belongs to all residents of Jerusalem, our hearts and thoughts are with the dear Armenian Jerusalemite community. I understand from my dear friend Harut Baramian that most members of the Armenian community in Israel are descendants of survivors and refugees of the genocide, and this community is part of us. The denial of past atrocities adds to the suffering, and we should try to correct this injustice and to contribute our small share by remembrance and by showing solidarity. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for attending this event tonight. It is our moral duty as a university to remember not only based on academic interest, but in order to prevent future massacres. These events of remembrance may bring about outcomes such as obtaining reparations and other forms of transitional justice, including recognition. It is also our duty to fight against all forms of discrimination and incitement, and to fight for equality and respect of human dignity. Following the leadership of Professor Michael Stone, who established the program in Armenian Studies here at the Hebrew University, we nowadays work to secure funding to enable a further extension of the scope of our academic activities in this field, including the establishment of a chair, and I hope that we will be able to succeed in this process. I would like to thank the members of the organizing committee of this annual event, to Professor Stone, to Professors Amitai, Shalev, and Steinberg for their great efforts in organizing this event, and to the speakers and presenters here. I wish us much success in this memorial evening and symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Medina. Over the years, we have maintained warm relations with the Armenian Patriarch of Jerusalem and always coordinated these memorial evenings with them. This is the time to send our warm greetings to His Beatitude, Archbishop Noran Manouchian, Armenian Patriarch of Jerusalem, who has been very supportive of this annual event. This evening, the Very Reverend Father Koryun Bagdasaryan, Chancellor of the Armenian Patriarch of Jerusalem, will greet us. Thank you.
ערב טוב לכולם, אני כאן כדי להקריא את הברכות שהפטריארך הארמני של ירושלים שלח כאן לכולכם. Dear distinguished guests, today in this hall we are gathered to remember a very sad event, the genocide of the Armenians, one of the worst atrocities against Armenians and against humanity. It is understood that for political and economic reasons, nations and different groups of people oppose and clash with each other to gain some superiority in power and or to dominate the economy of the places they live. We consider such clashes as normal course of life. But when hatred and intolerance become active in the scene, they create turmoil and upheavals where nations and people behave as wild and as inhuman. We may wonder if education would ever change human nature to love and to tolerate others, different than you, to be next to you, with all the rights and privileges you have under the law. I believe that right education from childhood can play a great role in the relationship of nations. Education trains the person to be tolerant and acceptable within the society of his/her own group. In general, Armenians were and are a law-abiding people in the countries that they live. It is said when religion is mixed with politics and vice versa, the peace is rattled, therefore fights and wars become inevitable. When there is war or large demonstrations, many wrong things can happen. Law and common sense do not exist at that moment. So the powerful will dominate by causing heavy losses. Above all, when injustice is in place, people will speak up demanding justice. We believe such causes were the bottom line of the situation that ignited the Armenian Genocide and the Holocaust of the Jewish people. Both genocides are the shame of the world. If precautionary means are not taken, the world will be surprised to witness new massacres, mass killings. Although few scores of countries have recognized the Armenian Genocide by condemning Ottoman Turkey for perpetrating the Armenian Genocide, yet there are many countries, and unfortunately Great Britain is one of them, whose Prime Minister years ago declared by saying, I quote, "Our warships cannot reach Mount Ararat," end of quote. Thus, shamefully not admitting that such genocide occurred, encouraging Turkey to deny its ancestors' cruel acts that wiped out the native Armenians from their homeland, systematically killing 1.5 million, if not more people, because they hated and could not tolerate an industrious and creative people. On this 107th anniversary of our genocide, we wholeheartedly thank all countries, high-ranking individuals, and people who feel compassion and sympathy with us. We thank Mr. President Joe Biden of the United States for recognizing the Armenian Genocide and for his meaningful statement in memory of those who were killed by the Turks. In the name of the Armenian Patriarchate of Jerusalem, I sincerely congratulate and thank the administration of the Hebrew University, which organized this evening in memory of the Armenian Genocide, and thank the professors and individuals who put their efforts to hold this dignified memorial of the Armenian Genocide. We hope and pray that one day we all accept each other with respect and tolerance. Let us work together to establish a good and inviolable society to enjoy life peacefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Kurion. Let me present the next speaker. Advocate Kavokn Al-Bandanyan is a lay judge at the Regional Labor Court of Jerusalem. He is well known to many of you as an activist in the Armenian community and working to strengthen Jewish-Armenian relations. Please.
Good evening to you all, and greetings to this sad evening that we are together. I'd like to greet our elder of the tribe, Professor Stone. Thank you for your years of accompanying us. You were the spirit and still the spirit that pushes us and encourages us and gives us hope to continue. I'd like also to greet His Excellency Arman Hagopian, the ambassador of Armenia to Israel, and also we cannot without the representative of the Armenian Patriarchate, Father Guryun, the Chancellor of the Armenian Patriarchate, and Mr. Tsolag Momjian, the Honorary Consul of Armenia in Jerusalem. This is a special occasion for us. As an Armenian community, as a minority inside a bigger minority, and I'm referring to our member that is not with us, unfortunately, Mr. Harut Baghamian. It's a historical moment for us as Armenians to be proud and happy and celebrate having the first Armenian on the staff of the diplomacy of the Israeli Foreign Ministry. It's a great achievement. It's a great pride for us. We love you, Harut. You are not with us, and we are sure that you will continue to represent both the state and our interest on your best abilities. I call it from ashes to living stones, carrying the third generation of the Armenian survival. Thank you, Harut, for your perseverance, for representing us, and I'm sure that you will be one of the torches that still continues to hold it and to go forward. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to Advocate Nalbandian. I wish to invite now Mr. Christine Movesian, Chairperson of the Union of Armenian Communities in Israel, a union that was established following the recent war in Al-Qask. Is she here? Yes. Okay.
שלום לכולם, קודם כל רציתי להודות לכל המארגנים על האירוע החשוב הזה. אנחנו 107 שנים לרצח העם הארמני. אני נינה, סבא רבא שלי שהוא שרד בוון. האירוע הזה זה אירוע שהוא סופר קשה למשפחה שלי, ואני חושבת שהפצע הזה לא משחרר אותנו כי עדיין כל העולם לא מכיר בזה. זה מאוד מפריע לנו, במיוחד שמדינת ישראל מכחישה, אבל אנחנו יודעים שיש המון אנשים טובים, כמו באוניברסיטאות ובבית הספר שמלמדים, וזה סופר חשוב ללמד כדי שדברים וזוועות כאלה לא יקרו בעתיד, כמו שאנחנו רואים שזה קורה גם כיום. אני מאוד מאוד מתרגשת, תודה רבה שאתם באמת מארגנים, מזמינים, זה סופר חשוב, ואני מקווה שיחד נוכל לקדם את הנושא, נוכל שיותר ילמדו על זה, סופר חשוב גם בבתי ספר שהנוער יכיר בזה, ילמד, ידבר על זה, ואנחנו עוקבים אחרי כל מה שאתם עושים, ותודה רבה לכם.
First of all, I would like to, in the name of the members of the organizing committee, to express their profound gratitude to Mr. Tsolag Momjian, Honorary Consul of the Republic of Armenia in Jerusalem, for his long-time encouragement, support, and sound advice, both for the annual memorial evenings and the activities of the program in Armenian studies. Mr. Momjian will also state the concluding remarks, but please join me in a round of applause to Mr. Momjian for his endless effort. I would now like to call His Excellency Armano Kapatyan, Ambassador of the Republic of Armenia to Israel. As I understood, he also founded a Hebrew program in Armenia once. And he also can speak Hebrew, but perhaps next year. Okay. But this time will be sufficient with English. Please. English is great. English is great.
Good evening, everyone. I am Armenian Kapatyan, the ambassador of Armenia, and I sincerely apologize for arriving late. We've been caught in a very bad traffic, and then it took us half an hour to understand how this system works at the university. First of all, I would like to thank the Hebrew University and also its Armenian Studies program for organizing this event, and also to thank all of you for attending it. I first visited the Hebrew University nearly 25 years ago, and it's so good to be back here and to enjoy this wonderful, unique ambience that this world-renowned educational institution creates. I'm not here just because I represent Armenia in Israel, and it is my duty to attend events like this, but I'm here because I am a grandson of an Armenian genocide survivor. My grandmother, who was born in the city of Argesh on the shores of Lake Van in western Armenia, she was only 8 years old when her whole family was murdered by the Ottoman gendarmerie at their backyard. And by some miracle, she managed to escape and ended up in eastern Armenia, in the city of Gyumri, and in the American orphanage that was situated there. Perhaps you have heard about the Near East Relief Committee. It was the American benevolent institution that took care of thousands of Armenian orphans of the genocide. So she was one of the orphans at the American Near East Relief Orphanage. And also the only survivor with her was her brother, her younger brother, Melkon, who died there because of the typhus. So stories, every family in Armenia has stories like that. If you ask people in Armenia, every family will tell you a story more or less like this one, because in Armenia we are a nation of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the genocide survivors, the same as it is here in Israel. So this is something that you can understand easily. A few days ago, I participated at an event at Yad Vashem, and there were genocide, Holocaust survivors there who told their stories, who shared their memories of their childhood, these terrible stories of concentration camps and mass deportations. But when it comes to the Armenian genocide, it is nearly impossible anymore to find a living survivor of the Armenian genocide, because it happened 107 years ago. And it is now up to us to keep alive the memory, to tell these stories, and especially, and I never tire of telling this, that we should use every opportunity just to say their names, the names of the victims, because that's the only way to preserve the memory and to build this invisible monument in our memory and in our hearts. So I use this opportunity just to say the names of my great-grandparents, my grandmother's father and mother, Boros and Anna Sarkisian, of the city of Argesh, as I said, on the shores of the Lake Van in western Armenia. Her brother, the only brother, Melkon, who died in eastern Armenia, didn't survive, so he was also a victim. He was just 5 years old. Of course, I would like to mention the names of her other brothers and sisters, but I don't know them. So I just say my grandmother's brothers and sisters who were murdered in their own backyard by the Turkish gendarmerie. And of course, my grandmother, Nubar Sarkisian, who died in 1995, and until her last hour, her eyes were always wet because the terrible memories of her childhood always haunted her. So Grandma, I remember you, I remember your parents, your brother, your brothers and sisters whose names I don't know. Thank you very much for coming to this event. I appreciate that.
Now let me please turn to the program itself. As in our tradition, we will start with a reading of Ezekiel 37, 1-14, Vision of the Dry Bones, which we present in the original Hebrew text and then the Armenian translation. Mrs. Debbie Nabeldayan will read in Hebrew, then Mr. Yoav Leff, our longtime teacher of Armenian history and culture, will read the translation into Armenian. Please.
הייתה עלי יד אדוני, ויוציאני ברוח אדוני, וינחני בתוך הבקעה, והיא מלאה עצמות. והעבירני אליהם סביב סביב, והנה רבות מאוד על פני הבקעה, והנה יבשות מאוד. ויאמר אלי, בן אדם, התחיינה העצמות האלה? ויאמר אדוני אלוהים, אתה ידעת. ויאמר אלי, הנבא על העצמות האלה, ואמרת אליהם, העצמות היבשות שמעו דבר אדוני. כה אמר אדוני אלוהים לעצמות האלה, הנה אני מביא בכם רוח, וחייתם. ונתתי עליכם גידים, והעליתי בכם בשר, וקרמתי עליכם אור, ונתתי בכם רוח, וחייתם. וידעתם כי אני אדוני, וניבאתי כאשר צוויתי. ויהי קול כהנבאי והנה רעש, ותקרבו עצמות עצם אל עצמו. וראיתי והנה עליהם גידים ובשר עלה, ויקרם עליהם אור מלמעלה, ורוח אין בהם. ויאמר אלי, הנבא אל הרוח, הנבא בן אדם. ואמרת אל הרוח, כה אמר אדוני אלוהים, מארבע רוחות בואי הרוח, ופחי את הרוגים באלה ויחיו. והנבאתי כאשר צווני, ותבוא בהם הרוח ויחיו ויעמדו על רגליהם, חיל גדול מאוד מאוד. ויאמר אלי, בן אדם, העצמות האלה כל בית ישראל המה. הנה אומרים יבשו עצמותינו, ואבדה תקוותנו, ונגזרנו לנו. לכן הנבא ואמרת אליהם, כה אמר אדוני אלוהים, הנה אני פותח את קברותיכם, והעליתי אתכם מקברותיכם עמי, והבאתי אתכם אל אדמת ישראל. וידעתם כי אני אדוני, בפחי את קברותיכם, ובעלותי אתכם מקברותיכם עמי. ונתתי רוחי בכם, וחייתם. והנחתי אתכם על אדמתכם, וידעתם כי אני אדוני דיברתי, ועשיתי נאום אדוני.
Jev jerev iveraim dzerentiaren, jev jehanzis hogvuintiaren, jev jedzis imej dashtin, jev ein li ervoskerok madkan, jev sherjetsuitzis shurj esvoskeroken, jev ha bazum huijein, ivera yeresats dashtin, jev tsamakyal kuij. Jev asetsis, votimato, itzete kendanili nitzin, voskerked Eidokik, Jevasem, ter, tu, gites zaid. Jevasetsis, votimato, margariats ivera, voskeraced Eidocik, Jevasesces edosa, vosker tsamakyalk, luvaruk es batgam estiaren. Aisbes ase, ter, tsoskerosed tsaidosik. Ahavasik yes adzitz ivera zer, shunchkentani. Jev tats idzez giles, jev adzitz iveradzer marmines, jev tzgetzitz iveradzer mot, jev tats zogi im idzez, jev linichikendani, jev zanichik teyes yemter, jev margariatza vorpes jev heramanyed inster, jev yerev barbar i margariana lenimum, jev aha sharjumen, jev mertzitzav vosker ar vosker, Ar yura kanshur hodis. Եվ տեսի եւ հա ջիլեք, եւ մարմինեք պատեին, եւ ձգեր ի վրա նոցա մոտ, եւ շունչ ոչ կույր ինոսա։ Եվ ասեցիս, մարգարիած ոտի մոտո, մարգարիած ի վրա շնչույն, եւ ասացես ծե շունչն, այսպես ասե տեր, եկ շունչ ի ճողից հողմոց, եւ պշյա ի մերյալես հայսոսիկ եւ գեցեն։ Եվ մարգարիացա որպես եւ հրամանյեդ ինձ տեր, եւ եմուտ ինոսա շունչն, եւ եղեն կենտանի։ Եվ կանգնեցան կացին ի վրա ոտից յուրյանեց, ժողովուրդ բազում հույժ։ Եվ խոսեցավ ընդ իս տեր եւ ասե, ոտի մտո, ոսկերքդ այդոքիկ ամենայն տունդ Իսրայելի է, եւ դոկա ասեն, ճողացան ոսկերմեր, հատավ հույսմեր եւ մերակ։ Վայսեն այդորիկ մարգարիած եւ ասացես ցդոսա, այսպես ասե տեր, ահավադիկ ես բացից ես գերեզմանս ձեր եւ հանից ես ձեզ ի գերեզմանած ձերոց ժողովուրդիմ եւ տարայց ես ձեզ հերքրին Իսրայելի։ Եվ ձանիչիկ եթե ես եմ տեր, իբանալ ինձ ես գերեզմանս ձեր եւ հանել ես ձեզ ի գերեզմանած ձերոց ժողովուրդին։ Եվ տաց զոգի իմ ի ձեզ եւ լինիչիկ ընդանի եւ յետից ես ձեզ հերքրին ձերում եւ ձանիչիկ թե ես եմ տեր եւ խոսեցա եւ աղի ասե տեր։
Thank you both, Debbie and Yoav. And now we will have our first musical interlude. Again, we have an annual tradition of hosting the student of the St. Tamar Gasha's Armenian school in Jerusalem. Although every year we have a different combination of singers and songs. Please.
My name is Miran. I'm the vice principal of the Armenian school. It's already tradition that our students, the students of St. Akmanchad's Armenian school in Jerusalem, bring their part in this annual memorial evening and symposium for the Armenian Genocide organized by the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Our student this year, under the supervision of our cultural director, Mrs. Angela Dibkikian, will present the following neat program. So first, I would like to invite 3 students of the 5th grade. They will recite patriotic poems. So first, I would like to invite Kerani Najarian to recite Hayreni Kised. Portion de Renesse.
Հայրենիքիս հետ Հովանես Թումանյան վաղուց թեև իմ հայացքը անհայտին է ու հերվում ու իմ սիրտը իմ մտքի հետ անհուններն է թափարում բայց գարոդով ամեն անգամ երբ թափնեմ թեպի քեզ մղգդում է սիրտ ու սամվերջ քո թարաջից աղեգես ու քաղաքական զավակներից լուր շաքերից ուժասպար, և քյուղերից, և շեներից, դխուր, տադարգ ու խաբար, զարգված հայրենիք, զրգված հայրենիք, խրնվում են մտքիս հանթև, պարագները անհամար, դրորում են քո երեսը, քո թաշտերը ձագավար, ու չարտարար բողմակները աղագով բայրենի, ավարներով, ավերներով, խնջույքներով արյունի, որ թարցրին քեզ մշտական սև ու սուքի մոհովից, խեղճ ու դալգան քո երգերով, հայացքներով անջվից, ողբի հայրենիք, որբի հայրենիք, բայց հին ու նոր քո վերքերով գանքնած ես թու գենթանի, գանքնած քո հուն խորհրդավոր ջամփի նորի ու հնի, հարաճանքով սրդի խորքից, խոսք ես խոսում աստուծո հետ, ու խորհում ես խորին խորհուրդ, տանչանքներում չարաղեր, Խորում ես դու, եմ մեզ խոսքը, որ դու ասես աշխարհքին, ובתרנס אין ידירה ורצקדום אמת הוקין הויסי היירניק לויסי היירניק ובביקה הנורגן כאשלוי סבר הקדz הזר נוספי זנו כנרוב ג'רקדz וירנהס קופרצונקין הרדי סורקלנצ'ין גנסאג'ה ביד אירשוגר בידי ג'בדן הרצ'ין ובועד נר בורצ'ם בغزل ایران شورتر نمتکو بیدی کوبن کنورگیان که نور یرکروب نور خوسکوب ایم نور هایرنی که زور هایرنی.
I would like to invite Lucina Panosyan to recite the poem Yesi Manu Shayestani.
Yesi Manu Shayestani Yerishe Channels. Yes, imanu shayastani. Ale baham parnem sirum. Merhin sasi vokhpanvak. Latagumad larnem sirum. Arnanuman tagigneri uvarteri. Puira barman. Unaerian afchigneri. Hezajagun varnem sirum. Sirume meryegin kamuk. Chure chinch lijeluse. Arebanam ranu tmelva vishabatsayn puka basem matun gorats kharjitneri anhurangal baderasev uhanam ya khagakneri hazaram ya karnem sirum urellinem chem morana yes vokhpatsayn yerkeremer chem morana agot tartsats yergatakir kerkeremer ինչքան էլ սուր սիրտս խոցեն այրունական վերքերը մեր էլի ես որ պարնավար իմ Հայաստան յարն եմ սիրում իմ գալոդած սրդի համար ոչ մի ուրիշ հետյատ չգա նարեգացու կուչագի մեզ լուսաբսակ ջագատ չգա աշխար անցիր արարադի նման ջերմակ կակատ չգա ինչպես անհաս Parki Jampa, yesim masis, sarnem sirum.
Sarkis Gejagusyan will recite Gank Gelinenk.
Kicheng Paitay, Vairur Sevak. Min Kicheng Sagay Mez Hainasum. Մենք մեզ ոչ մեկի չենք կերակասում, բարձավես, մենք էլ պիտի ընդունենք, որ մենք միայն մենք արարատ ունենք, երբ որ այստեղ է բարձրիկ սևանում, երբ ինքը իր ճիշտ բաբջենը հանում, բարձավես, թավիթն այստեղ է գրվել, բարձավես նարեկն այստեղ է գրվել, Բարձապես գիտենք ժարից վան գերդել, քարի չինել ծուկ և թրջում գավից, ուսման համար և աշագերդել, մենք քիչ ենք սակայն մեզ հայն ասում, մենք մեզ ոչ մեկի չենք կերակասում, բարձապես մեր փախտը ուրիշ է եղել, բարձապես շատ ենք մենք այրուն հեղել, բարձապես մենք մեր թարավոր կյանքում Թարցյալ չենք դնշել, մեկ ուրիշ ասկի, ոչ ոք չի դուժել զարգից մեր պազգի, բարձավես մահն էր մեզ սիրահարվել, իսկ մենք իգնական նրան չենք դրվել, ու երբ ջարահատ մեր հողն ենք տողել, ուր էր որ ասել, որտեղ է եղել, ջանաչել ենք մենք ամենքին համար, ամենքին դվել միտք արած երկեր, պաշտպանել նրանց հոգևոր ծնդից, ամեն դեղ թողել մեր աչքից սոլանք, մենք քիչ ենք այո փայտ կոչվում ենք հայ, գիտենք թերջանցած վերքերից տնկալ, փայտ նոր խնդուչամբ ձնձալ ու հրճվել, գիտենք դժնամու կողը մխրջել, իսկ բարեկամին թարնալ աչակից, դուրս գալ մեզ արված փարության դագից, մեկի փոխարեն 10 հատուցելով, գիտենք հվյալվել մեր կյանքով նաև, Փայստեգամենան մեզ բռնի բարել, մենք գիտենք մխալ և գրակ մարել, իսկ եթե պետք է խավարը ծրել, գիտենք մոխրանալ որպես վար գերոն, և գիտենք մեզ կրգոտ սիրել, փայտ ուրիշներին միշտ հրարկելով, Մենք մեզ ոչ մեկից չենք կերատասում, և ինչու պիտի չբադանանք, գանք, պիտի լինենք ու թեր շադանանք։
Godoraz Nankut, a song about the massacres of Adana, will be sung by the 7th grade student Mary Kalajian, accompanied by the 7th grade student Talar Dermatosyan on piano. A musical piece, Abrelu Abril, violin, 6th grade, Kohar Dermatosyan, and accompanied by piano, 7th grade, Talar Dermatosyan. A song, Gyanko Gariv, will be sung by our former student Aida Gejagushan. She graduated last year and is a student in the preparatory program of Rothberg School. Please. Last but not least, 10th grade student Daniel Kasabian will read in Hebrew a perspective of a great grandson of survivor of the Armenian Genocide.
רצח העם הארמני התרחש בעיקר בין השנים 1915 ו-1917. בשנים אלה נרצחו 1.5 מיליון מבני עמנו, גברים, נשים, ילדים וזקנים. לכל אחד מאיתנו סיפור אישי הקשור לרצח העם. שם המשפחה שלי קסביאן. אני רוצה לשתף כמה סיפורים אישיים. אח של סבתא שלי נלקח על ידי טורקים ביחד עם עוד חבר משפחה. והשליחו אותם לבאר. אדם קורדי שמע קולות מישהו נחנק, מצא אותם והציל אותם ולקח אותם ללבנון. אח של סבתא שלי התחתן שם ונולדו לו 7 ילדים. אמא של סבתא שלי גם נחטפה על ידי הטורקים והתאחדה עם אח שלה בלבנון אחרי 20 שנה. הרוצחים היו בני העם הטורקי. עד היום הזה טורקיה אינה מוכנה להכיר בפשע שלה. יותר מ100 שנים הטורקים משקרים ומסלפים את ההיסטוריה. אנחנו כאן כדי לספר את האמת. אנחנו כאן כדי לזכור את הפשע הנורא. אנחנו כאן כדי לזכור את 1.5 מיליון הקורבנות. אנחנו כאן כדי לדרוש צדק היסטורי. אנחנו כאן כדי לדרוש מממשלת ישראל להכיר סוף סוף ברצח העם שלנו. אנחנו כאן כדי להבטיח שהעם הארמני חזק מכל אויב.
אנחנו נוציא את זה, בסדר?
I want to thank the very emotional songs and speeches by the students, and thank you to the school again. We now get to the keynote artist of the evening. I'm very honored to present Dr. Amit Kult, who received his PhD from Clark University History Department in 2016. He's the author with Tanar Akcham of The Spirit of the Laws, The Plunder of Wealth in the Armenian Genocide. He was postdoctoral fellow in the Center of Middle Eastern Studies at Harvard University in 2016-2017, and visiting assistant professor in the Armenian Studies program at California State University in 2017-2018. He is currently a Polonsky Fellow at the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute and teaching in the Department of Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies at Hebrew University of Jerusalem. His recent book, The Armenians of Intab, The Economics of Genocide in Ottoman Province, has been published in 2021 by Harvard University Press. His lecture today is titled Theaters of Violence on the Ottoman Periphery, Exploring the Local Roots of Armenian Genocide. Please.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor for me to be here with you for such an important event, memorial event, and I would like to thank each and every department and organizational unit of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem to make this important event happen for all of us. The Armenians of Ottoman Empire experienced a calamity of the greatest degree during the World War I. Many males, including youths, were executed outright, while the rest of men, women, children, and elderly were deported to barren lands of modern-day Iraq and Syria. Those deported were subjected to every manner of misery: kidnapping, rape, torture, murder, and death from exposure, starvation, and thirst by the every possible adversary, ranking from Ottoman gendarmeries, Turkish and Kurdish irregulars, and tribespeople to the Ottoman army. Those who escaped deportation, primarily women and children, were forced to convert to Islam, as a Muslim identity was considered a cornerstone of the new nation state. Principally perpetuated by the Committee of Union and Progress, elite, which largely controlled the Ottoman government at the time. These events constitute what we now know as the Armenian Genocide. Existing studies demonstrate the relevance of the mass destruction of Armenians within the broader context of world, European, and Ottoman history. This contextualization tells the story of annihilation of Armenians primarily from the perspective of perpetrators and global political actors rather than local agents. With a few exceptions, the current aforementioned scholarship lacks the focus on the local level or the periphery. The existing research also suffers from an important empirical problem, a lack of sources from the ethnic groups subject to violence. Some works reconstruct the history of violence solely through the prism of Ottoman archives, while the others rely on the European sources. Both are deficient in terms of Armenian sources. Using materials from as many of the involved parties as possible provides us with a better understanding of the factors that led to the eruption of violence in localities and its culmination in the massacres. The genocidal process is guided equally from the locality as it's from the center. Any orders from above are subject to be accepted or rejected by local power brokers, the social and political elites. The relationship between the central and local power brokers is symbiotic. The central authorities need the local actors to carry out their orders, while the local actors need the central authorities to so-called legitimize their actions, in turn solidifying their social standing. I focus on the Ottoman district of Aintab, where I was born and grown up, modern-day Gaziantep, 55 kilometers to the west of the Euphrates and 45 kilometers to the north of the modern Turkish-Syrian border, to exemplify and substantiate how these dynamics constitute and shape the Armenian genocide at the local level. The southern Ottoman provinces of Greater Cilicia were, much like the rest of the empire, composed of various ethnic groups. It was the same for the center of the Antep district within the Aleppo province. Christians and Muslims seemed to be lived together, while knowing that the latter had the upper hand in an imperial monarchical structure. Yet, beginning in the second half of the 19th century, the Armenians of Aintab went through various social, political, sociocultural, and economic transformations. These changes became evident in several areas: the economy, trade, education, and religious institutions. The advancement of the Aintab's Armenian population in all these walks of life altered this imperially hierarchical structure. Having realized these skewed socioeconomic, sociopolitical, and sociocultural developments, the Muslim community unsuccessfully attempted to keep pace with the Armenians, and doing so generated a sense of inferiority among themselves. This feeling, combined with the rejection of equality with the Armenians, caused the relatively harmonious coexistence between the two groups to become antagonistic. Reform programs also upset many Muslims with their rhetoric of inter-religious equality. The Muslim community's envy and resentment play a central role in hate-mongering atmosphere. So these asymmetries provided an ideal background that upset the fragile balance and created a social climate that nurtured the utilization of tools of violence. The momentum of this violence first became evident in 1895 and resurfaced again in 1909, but it was not fully put into action for various reasons. The Armenians of Aintab greatly benefited from the Young Turk Revolution of 1908. It gave them greater political power at the expense of Muslims, who previously held considerable cultural and political capital. A career in the military, civil service, or politics was no longer off limits for Armenians. Muslims, representative of the dominant component of the empire, had difficulty accepting this new political reality. It's likely that being considered an equal citizen with the quote-unquote inferior Armenians angered many Muslims. The Turkish Muslim community was already jealous of the Armenian minorities in their eyes unjust economic success and dominance in the mercantile professions of business, trade, and commerce with the Ottoman economy, as well as their economic prosperity. Being equal with them at the political and citizenship level further aggravated this feeling of anger, grievance, and resentment. These sentiments hardened ethno-economic identities and resulted in antagonism between the Armenian minority and the dominant Muslim community. Previously ossified ethnic and economic affiliations and the ensuing antagonism were amplified further during the Ottoman Empire's political and economic decline. These groups thought they were being deprived of their ruling nation status and felt degraded. Finally, in 1915, violence erupted. Unequivocally, local dynamics had a remarkable impact on the application of mass violence in 1915. So, I would like to talk a little bit about the demography of Aintab on the onset of World War I, because it remains crucial context for the deportation process, especially in that district. Various Armenian, French, and British sources estimate the Armenian population of Aintab in 1914 as somewhere between 34 and 38,000. According to Turkish sources, the total number of Armenians was between 20 to 30,000, and the deportation of Aintab Armenians began in August 1915, late compared with the deportation in most eastern region in Armenian Plateau or Western Armenia. In late March 1915, Aleppo's provincial governor Celal Bey reported to Cemal Pasha, the 4th Army commander and the Syrian governor, that some Armenians living in Aintab's Muslim quarters were discreetly moving their belongings to the Armenian quarters. The news was creating great concern among the Muslim population, who feared that the Armenians were preparing to revolt. Cemal Pasha informed the Minister of Interior, Talat Bey, which in response ordered Aleppo province to make the following announcement in Aintab on March 29th. I quote, "No Armenian shall be allowed change of a place, no tedbili mekan. Those who have done so shall return to their prior neighborhood," unquote. But it added the reassuring promise that the properties, lives, and honor of the population loyal to the government shall be protected against any attacks, and the slightest assault by the Muslim population against any Armenian, even if they were revolutionaries or rioters, shall be subject to immediate disciplinary action, unquote. As it turned out, Aintab's Armenians eventually were deported, but only in August 1915, after much of the rest of the eastern Anatolia had already been cleansed. Why were Aintab's Armenians spared for so long? Aram Andonyan, an Armenian journalist and intellectual who survived the arrest and deportation in late April 1915 and found refuge in Aleppo, had immediately begun collecting information on the government's annihilation campaign and would continue to do so throughout the war. His files contain material on Aintab that provide an invaluable source for the dynamics driving the fate of the Aintab Armenians. Aram Andonyan learned that as early as March 1915, the leaders of Aintab's CUP branch, led by Ali Cenani, the district parliamentary deputy, Fadıl Bey, the former district governor of Kilis, and Hacı Mustafa Bey, a prominent Kilis notable, began taking advantage of the incidents in Zeytun and Maraş to depict the Aintab's own Armenians as a harmful element. The CUP leaders, Committee of Union and Progress Party, the ruling government then, CUP leaders repeatedly appealed to Istanbul, hoping to obtain a deportation order for the Armenians of Aintab and Kilis altogether. The appeal was thwarted, however, by Mehmet Şükrü Bey, Aintab's district governor, and Hilmi Bey, Aintab's military commander, even though both men, as Armenian survivors noted, were themselves unionists. The military commander simply informed the central government that there was no valid reason for deportation. Other Armenians in the district, Kirkor Bogaryan and Sebu Aguni, confirm Andonyan's picture of Mehmet Şükrü and Hilmi Bey's opposition to deportation. Not daunted by this official opposition, the three Aintab notables, with the assistance of their Maraş counterparts, then organized provocations. They also sent telegrams to the central government claiming that Aintab Armenians had attacked mosques with weapons, killed Muslims, raped Muslim women, burned down Muslim houses, and plundered their properties. Hilmi Bey responded by personally requesting Cemal Pasha to punish the notables as provocateurs. Although his opponents countered by branding Hilmi as an Armenian sympathizer, Celal Bey added his support for the commander by reporting that this situation was causing great panic among the Aintab Armenians. His investigations revealed an Armenian community that feared general massacre, umumi kıtal. In the light of these charges and counter charges, Cemal Pasha dispatched Fahri Pasha, his commander, to Aintab on April 8, 1915, to investigate the situation in person. Police searches of the Armenian neighborhoods failed to provide any confirmation of the accusations of Deputy Ali Cenani and his cronies. In fact, the Armenian Council of Aleppo, Jesse Jackson, noted that Fahri Pasha announced to Aintab's leading Muslims in the presence of Christians, quote, if any Muslim frightened Christians or in any way treated them unkindly, he would himself hang him, even if the offender were his own brother, unquote. He himself behaved toward the Christian leaders in Aintab in a very friendly manner. However, according to the German consul at Aleppo, Walter Rössler, the Christians were deceived by Fahri, to whom he attributed, quote, the harshest and the most merciless implementation of the deportation, unquote. In fact, after Fahri Pasha left Aintab, the situation worsened. Following the one uprising, Ali Bey, a ranking member of the special organization, Teşkilat-ı Mahsusa, and bandit leader, was summoned by Ali Cenani, and in late April he arrived in Aintab. Ali Bey, a fierce member of the Teşkilat-ı Mahsusa, came to Aintab along with a squadron of bandits, mostly consisting of Kurds and Arabs from villages surrounding Aintab, who began organized pillaging and the first murders outside the city. Then on April 13, 1915, the first raids inside in the city took place. To obtain the weapons and quote-unquote harmful writings alleged to be hidden in Aintab, the houses of prominent Armenians, including Dashnak Suchin and Hunchakin members, were raided. Nothing incriminating was found. Nevertheless, many Armenians were arrested. Another wave of house search was conducted on May 1st, and 10 men were arrested, brought before the military court in Aleppo. In addition, 30 leading political figures from the Armenian community were sent to Aleppo for interrogation. Following the questioning, 18 were returned to Aintab. Again, no incriminating evidence was found, and all were set free. On May 12th, house raids and individual arrests of intellectuals peaked with the collective arrest of 200 people. But the provincial governor Celal Bey of Aleppo helped release most of those apprehended. Some detainees were freed on the same day, others a few days later. Meanwhile, Aintab's Armenians became witnesses the deportations of these from less fortunate regions. As house raids and police searches in Aintab continue, on May 3rd, they saw the first convoy, comprising 300 women and children from Zeytun, pass through their city. The deportees had suffered greatly on their way. Some were injured, their wounds infected, and their clothes in tatters. Miss Frierson, an American missionary worker, noted that Aintab's Armenians could form a relief committee for the deportees. John Merrill from the Central Turkey College and Dr. Hamilton and the nurses from the American hospital in the city also exerted strenuous efforts to aid the deportees, many of whom, children included, were suffering from serious knife wounds. More deportees followed. U.S. Consul of Aleppo Jackson observed, from Zeytin, 350 families, or about 2,000 persons, have been sent to Marash, and from there to Aintab, and are expected to arrive in Aleppo about May 1915, to be sent to Meskene, while about 240 or more families are expected to follow before May 20 to report to Aleppo governor. Indeed, throughout June and July 1915, convoys from Zeytun, Marash, Elbistan, Gürün, Sivas, and Furnus continued to fill the streets of Aintab on their way south towards Syria. All of them were in a similar destitute condition, having suffered continual attacks on their persons and property along the way. All deportees were kept in Kavaklık neighborhood, 15 minutes from the city center, near a spring where they had to pay gendarmerie a quarter of Mecidiye on 1 piaster, equals 15 pfennigs per glass of water. Aintab's Armenians bribed the gendarmeries and tried to supply the deportees with food and water themselves. Yet, while Aintabsis bore witness to these horrors, they did not consider the possibility they could face a similar fate. Vahe Güleserian, who was there, described this state of mind with this striking passage. I quote, "In spite of everything that was happening around us, in spite of all the facts standing in front of our eyes, the number of those who buried their head in the sand like an ostrich was not small. These people convinced themselves that they were happy, and they tried to deceive themselves into believing that a similar deportation was not possible for Aintab and that nothing bad would happen to them," unquote. Previously, Armenians had relied upon the honesty and kindness of Celal Bey, Mehmet Şükrü, and Hilmi as a shield against deportation. The period of wishful thinking ended when Cemal Bey, General Secretary of Aleppo CUP branch, arrived in late June, accompanied by a few propagandists. The mission of this unionist cadre was to convince Aintab's notables to repeat their entreaties to Istanbul to issue a deportation order. Cemal Bey, succeeding in pressuring the local CUP and other Muslim leaders to send new cylinder letters to the capital. On June 21, 1915, Rösler reported that Governor Celal Bey was to be removed from his post because of his refusal to deport Armenians. And indeed, on June 13th, in a reshuffling of provincial governorships, Bekir Sami Bey was given to Aleppo seat, while Celal Bey was moved to Konya. On July 5th, Celal left Aleppo. Aram Andonyan mourned, noting in his Aintab file the following: Aintab Turks, collaborating with unionists in Aleppo, succeeded in removing the honest, charitable, and reasonable governor of Aleppo from his post, unquote. Still, as late as July 17th, Aintab's own district governor, Mehmet Şükrü Bey, was able to inform the Minister of Interior, Talat Pasha, that no Armenian had been deported from Aintab. Dissatisfied with this state of affairs, Talat replaced Mehmet Şükrü with Ahmet Faik on 26th of July. Around the same time, Hilmi Bey, Aintab's military commander, also resigned. On July 29th, the local CUP at last received a reply to its entreaties from the central government, and Aintab was added to the deportation list. By the time Ahmet Faik reached Aintab on August 26, deportation in the city had already begun. Once they received the news from Istanbul, local young Turks called an emergency meeting and prepared the list of Armenians to be deported. On July 31st, in his report to Imperial Chancellor Bertbang Holweg, Consul Rösler stated that deportation would be particularly unjustified and especially hard from the town of Aintab, in which large percentage of educated and relatively wealthy families live because urban dwellers are even less used to the hardships of the road than people living in the country. Additionally, Rösler underlined that Aintab was situated neither in a war zone nor along the military road. Subsequently, he notified his superiors that the order to deport Armenians from Aintab at Kilis had just been issued. The American representative passed the news along to his ambassador a few days later, adding that the order also applied to Antakya and Kesap. In Beşgöz, between Aintab and Kilis, the people of the village were discussing the fact that deportation was to commence in Aintab the next day. After a while, a well-dressed gentleman, by his appearance a Circassian, wearing a partly civilian and partly officer clothing, joined the people and inquired from which part of the town people would live, which road they will take, what kind of people it would be, and what one could possibly pilfer from these people. When one of those present asked him if he was a civilian or a member of the military, he grinned slyly and questioned rhetorically, "Is there a more opportune moment to be a soldier than the present one?" At the same time, July 29th, all the prominent members of the Armenian community gathered in CUP Armenian deputy Hrant Sulahyan's house to discuss the deportation decision. Yeah. Sorry. In this meeting, Dashnak Sutyun was represented by Armenak Maksudyan, Toros Merjanyan, and Arshak Kalutsyan. Dikran Sebu Chakmakchian represented Hınçakyan. Barsumyan, a Dashnak Sutyun reporter, took the notes of the meeting. Quote, "Our suggestion was that we should defy the order and take up arms. But unfortunately, our call was not heeded, and in the end, we were forced to remain silent. Towards the end, Avedis Kalemkerian said that weapons must be taken out of their hidden places and people must get ready to resist. The attendees of the meeting put pressure on him and he had to succumb to their decision." Unquote. On July 30th, the 50 Armenian villages were ordered to leave Aintab within the next 24 hours. Their deportation began on August 1st. The persistent efforts of some of the Aintab's most prominent citizens to get the central government to expel the district, Armenians seem to have enjoyed locally a considerable level of social support. Yet, for some time, these demands encountered resistance from several powerful civil and military figures. The result was that Aintab's Armenians were deported later, most of their eastern neighbors. So, at first, only Gregorian Orthodox Armenians were deported. On August 1st, the 50 families, approximately 400 Armenians, departed with a few light belongings, locking their roads and leaving behind nearly all their assets. The first convoy was not given time to gather all their valuables. According to instructions, each family was expected immediately to pack a few of their belongings. They would be allowed to take food, bedding, jars, clothes, and blankets. The testimony of Yervant Derents, a survivor from Aintab, vividly recollects the very first day of the deportation. Quote, "Children, elders were all on the road. Our neighbors, the Turks, were singing from their homes. We could hear them. It yola bindi, it yola bindi, it yola bindi. The dog, it's on its way. The dog, it's on its way. The dog, it's on its way." Unquote. Even then, comforting rumors softened the blow. That the exile was only for 3 or 4 months, that the deportees would be sent to places like Aleppo, Damascus, Hama, and Humus, where life could continue, and that one would be managing the convoys, and that only individuals suspected of subversive political activities would be deported. The first convoy, consisting primarily of notable and affluent families such as the Cebejians, Demirjians, Prenyans, Kabakyans, Kürkçüyans, and Leylekyans, along the members of the Deportation Relief Committee, left for Aleppo, after which the convoy continued to Hama. Walking in a line, these deportees proceeded to Akçakoyunlu train station with their carts, hired camels, and other draught animals. Akçakoyunlu was a transition camp for many deportees. According to the directions of the Minister of Interior, they were initially to be transferred to Aleppo, transferred, it's a euphemism of course, and then dispersed to various districts and the towns of Biledesham. At Akçakoyunlu station, they were housed in tents under close surveillance, only 9 hours from the desert area to which they would be sent. As this convoy was making its way from the western side of Aintab, bands comprising 400 men and led by Ali, Yasin, and Hacı Fazlazade Nuri Beys set off from the east side, intending to assault them in the nearby Sazgın village, where deportees would spend the night. Ismail Bey, nephew of Hacı Fazlazade Nuri, helped his uncle as chief of the bands. Hacı Hamza Bey, the Muhtar of Sazgın village, was the chief of other bands. Fortunately, these bands departed later than the first convoy and missed most deportees. However, they were able to catch Nazaret Manushagyan, a member of the municipal council who fell behind the convoy, whom they murdered. 2 days after the first convoy left Aintab, another wave of house raids took place. On the grounds that Armenians had connections with people outside from the empire's borders, many houses and shops were turned upside down. Consequently, 7 people were arrested and sent to prison in Birecik and Aleppo. On August 7th, the second convoy of 50 Armenian more families was deported. On the same day, this time formed by peasants from the village of Tilbaşar, Mezra, Hınıslı, Kantara, Ekiskapı, Bahne Hameyni, and Sazgın carried out attacks on deportees. The bandits were led by Emin Efendi. Who was Emin Efendi? Emin Efendi was manager of Agricultural Bank and an important figure in Aintab's quote-unquote good society. Indeed, he was a member of the Aintab's deportation committee. The second convoy was systematically pillaged by the bands less than a day's march away from the city. As deportees from the second convoy were able to take their valuable belongings with them, the attackers, locals mostly, looted a huge number of money and jewelry with the consent of several government authorities. Assigned to protect the deportees, Kürt Hacı Nuri Bey collaborated with these bands and beat Nazar Nazaryan, a wealthy Armenian and permanent member of the city council, to death. The day after, August 8, the third convoy, this time composed of 100 families from Kayacık and Akyol neighborhoods, departed again with carts, camels, and draft animals. After spending the night at Sazgın village, they were led to Akçakoyunlu station. The fourth convoy was let out from Aintab on August 11, and another 100 families, many of them well off, from Kayacik, İbni Eyüp, and Kastelbaşı neighborhoods. Priest Nerses Tavukçiyan, Professor Armenak Camciyan, and dozens of teachers were also included in this convoy. The fifth convoy set off on August 13. The convoy numbered more than 120 families, approximately 1,400 people, from Eblahan and Akyol. When the fifth convoy arrived in Akçakoyunlu, Kirikor Bogaryan, one of the deportees in this convoy, described the scene he witnessed in his diary. The fourth convoy and deportees from other regions were gathered here, waiting for train. Therefore, our convoy had to wait for these people to be sent away first. We stay in tents, but the heat was scorching. Dust and straw were everywhere. We had food to eat, but our water was limited. We were waiting for the train, but the train never returned from the east with empty wagons. Around August 20th, part of the Young Turk Committee in Aintab, upon hearing a false rumor that an armed horde of Armenians was marching towards the town, wanted to start a panic and call up a massacre. In response, on August 23rd, the sixth convoy reached Akçakoyunlu this time. There were around 120 Armenian families from Kayacik, the neighborhood of Surf Asvazat Sinyegagetsi, Eblahan, İbni Eyüp, and Kastelbaşı again. Unlike other convoys, those who came from Aintab included men, women, and children over 10 years old. From Akçakoyunlu, the first two groups, the ones from August 1st and August 7th, were sent to Damascus. The rest were held in a transit camp surrounded by barbed wire while waiting to be loaded in the stock cars for transport to Aleppo. These deportees were later sent on foot to the region of Derzo. Surprisingly, in a telegram to the Minister of Interior, Aleppo's new provincial governor Bekir Sami Bey claimed that deportees from Aintab, Kilis, and province border regions were sent only to Hama, partly by train and partly overland. As of August, to prevent them from fleeing, all Armenians were prohibited from leaving the city unless a deportation order was issued for them. Deportation of Catholic and Protestant Armenians were also happened in the city. By August 24th, the population of Protestant Armenians in Aintab was approximately 5,100, and that of Catholic Armenians around 350-370. The new district governor, Ahmet Faik Bey, arrived in the city on 29th of August and launched the preparations for the deportation of Catholic and Protestant Armenians as well as remaining Orthodox. Ahmet Faik was a harsh man who spread terror all around and held radical opinions towards Armenians. It was during his term that the road to deportation was changed from Aleppo, Hama, Hauran to Meskene, Resul Ain, and Derzor. In the eyes of Talat, Aintab was still the center of activity for Armenians. He referred to it in his telegram as Little Armenia and considered it to present a serious threat. Therefore, the deportation of Catholic and Protestant Armenians was also deemed necessary. Only after the Orthodox Armenians had been expelled did the authorities issue the order on September 19 to deport Catholics of Aintab. By late September, 3/4 of the Armenian population had been deported. After the official announcement of Protestants' exemption from deportation, the majority of the Protestant community carried on with their normal lives. They even held a Thanksgiving service at which a Protestant Armenian leader stated, quote, "Now that we are permitted to stay in our city, we must be very careful to give no occasion of complaint to the government. If they ask for our sons as soldiers, we must give them up without murmuring. If for money or goods or clothing for the soldiers, let us give as if we appreciated the privilege of staying in our homes. Let us show them that we are loyal to the country. Let no one take into his home a child or anyone else who has been told to go, whether they be of those passing through the city as refugees or from among our own friends and relatives in town. Let us show to the government that we will do all that's asked of us," unquote. However, in early October, Ahmet Faik and his allies then organized raids on Protestant houses and made numerous arrests. The process they had been witnessing eventually eroded the Armenian Protestants' belief that they would be spared the deportation suffered by the Orthodox and the Catholics. But there were no measures the Armenians could take against it. Around mid-October 1915, Ahmet Faik mobilized the remaining Armenian men between the ages of 16 and 20 and assigned them to a labor battalion that was put to work on the Baghdad railway construction site in Raja. He had 8 Armenian men executed in the town square on the grounds that they were involved in quote-unquote perfidious activities against the government. It became apparent that Ahmet Faik enjoyed a remarkable degree of freedom of action for executing central government orders. On November 20th, Protestant pastors were arrested, house raids increased, all the coffee houses and other places where people congregate were shuttered, and a curfew was imposed. Circumstances deteriorated further when Lieutenant Galip Bey, commander of a military reserve battalion from Urfa, arrived in Aintab on November 13. After meeting with Ahmet Faik, he gathered Armenians around the Armenian cemetery where they were detained. Central Turkey College was emptied on December 2nd. Positioning armed troops and the cannons to elevated vantages around the city, Ahmet Faik ordered his soldiers to decimate the Armenian neighborhoods that were still inhabited. Galip Bey held certain Armenians responsible for the resistance to deportation in Urfa in October, and he aimed to use that as a pretext to deport Aintab's Protestant Armenians. However, Draft Office President Yusuf Efendi, Military Commander Osman Bey, and Mayor Sheikh Mustafa Efendi objected to Galip Bey's plans. Despite this disagreement, on December 15th, the officers registered the names of Armenian Protestants who would be deported. On December 19, the first convoy was sent again via Akçakoyunlu to Derzor. The first was followed by the second, third, and fourth convoys until 23rd of December. By now, Aintab's Protestant had ample time to learn what deportation to Derzor meant and did not hesitate to use every means, such as bribery, personal contacts, and social capital to ensure that they would be deported via Humus Hama Damascus Road instead. It was to no avail. On December 24th, it was announced that deportations would be suspended until January 1st, 1916, thanks to Christmas. They recommenced it on January 4th when the 5th convoy was sent away. Of 600 Protestant families in Aintab, 200 were deported, the majority of whom were annihilated in Derzor. In total, by January 1916, the number of Aintab Armenians who had been exiled exceeded 20,000. Who were exempted? So to provide minimal services and meet the army's needs, the authorities decided to exempt 3 main categories of Aintab Armenians from deportation. The first, comprising 370 people, was made up of craftsmen employed in a factory that was responsible for furnishing the army with clothing, shoes, and ironware. The second consisted of 65 to 70 pharmacists, dentists, jewelers, goldsmiths, tinsmiths, cattle makers, veterinarians, tailors, masons, painters, settlers, and bakers, accompanied by their families. As the local Muslim population lacked these skills, these artisans were considered valuable assets. In the third category were the families of soldiers, officers, and medical officers who had been drafted into the Ottoman army. The number of families falling under this category was somewhere between 30 to 35. Although the Minister of Interior sent telegrams to provinces and provincial districts regarding the deportation exempt status of family members of ranked Armenian soldiers who officially serve in the army, in reality, these exemptions were not put into practice. Families of Armenian soldiers, some ranked as high as captain, like Avedis Cebejian, who served in the Ottoman army on various fronts, were also deported. From the large Armenian population at Aintab, only around 2,000 Armenians were allowed to remain. Among them, 30 families converted to Islam and thereby managed to stay. Nevertheless, those Armenian converts were regarded with suspicion as late as 1918. Who were the perpetrators? So it's important to underscore that the deportations organized in Aintab was supervised by a deportation committee, presided over by the district governor Ahmet Faik Bey. In the deportation committee, Every branch of respectable Aintab society was represented. The district's parliamentary deputy and his brother, the head of the provincial cabinet and a local prefect, the president of municipality, financial officers of the municipality, including head of its treasury, 2 officials in the tax department, 2 secretaries, a census officer, 2 judges, a magistrate, and the first secretary of the court. Law enforcement was also prominent, including 2 gendarmerie commanders, and yeah, I'll get there. And the commander of a bandit, 400 bands, along with several religious leaders, a former mufti, 2 imams, 2 ulema, 2 sheikhs, the secretary of religious charity, physician, lawyer, the director of an orphanage, and the director of the agricultural bank, the local leaders of the CUP, were also on the committee's rolls. This list points to the breadth of social support that underpinned the regime's genocidal policies in the city. Perhaps more important, men such as these legitimized the process of genocide. Not one of these local worthies did anything to protest the deportations, hide the vulnerable, stop the convoys. Many of them benefited enormously from the deportations and expropriations. So the Armenians of Cilicia in general, and in Aintab in particular, were deported to 3 places. The first group was sent to Derzor region in the Syrian desert, where very few survived. The second group was sent to the region of Hama, Humus, and Salamiya, located in the central part of the Syrian desert. Except for very young and old deportees, the majority there managed to survive, thanks to local Arabs. The third group was sent to the region of Jebel Duruz and the desert areas of Jordan, where most survived again. The exact number of deportees, the total death toll, and the number of survivors for Aintab are not exactly known. It's estimated, however, the number of Armenians deported from Aintab by the end of war was approximately 32,000, with the 20,000 perishing as a result of genocide, and 12,000 surviving. Approximately 4,000 Armenians were exempted from deportation. Survivors were most numerous among those deported via the Hama, Humus, and Damascus road. A great number of Aintab Armenians, mostly Orthodox, were deported to Salamiya, a district of Syria province in the southeast of Hama, where, thanks to efforts of District Governor Ahmet Necmettin Bey, a large number were able to survive. So, the implementation of the genocide and the significance of the confiscation of Armenian wealth were 2 inextricably linked processes in the context of Aintab. Expropriation and plunder of movable and immovable properties were essential to the process of destroying Armenians in the city of Aintab. For part of the local population in Aintab, acquisition of Armenian property was a strong incentive to participate in the anti-Armenian measures. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Amit. To begin with, I think that I speak on behalf of everyone here by praising you for your courage and scholarly integrity, I must say. I'm also looking forward to reading the book and learning more about it. I mean, we have to exchange books, but thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now we'll have our second musical interlude, this time with Ilya Mazia, Armenian duduk, and Eva Mazia, his daughter, cello. 3 Armenian songs, Komitas, 2 folk songs, and Ekmalyan, Amen, Holy Father, a liturgical song. Then we need some time to prepare, so it'll be a minute or 2. Thank you, Ilya and Eva, for these wonderful songs. Our next lecturer, please, I'm honored to welcome Ms. Serena Bush. Serena is a Jerusalemite Armenian who is currently undergoing her second year of national service at Yad Vashem. Serena has always had a passion for genocide prevention advocacy and aspires to contribute to this field in the future. Serena will formally begin her academic studies this fall in the field of international relations. Her topic will be discussing a look at the importance and implications of the Armenian genocide within Jewish society. Please, Serena.
Good evening, Reverend Father Gorion, Your Excellency, Honorable Ambassador Hagopian, Honorable Council Momjan, esteemed professors and friends from the Hebrew University, and respected guests. Living where we do, and particularly at this time of year, both our peoples, Armenians and Jews, recall terrible tragedy that was brought upon us. By examining certain figures of both Armenian and Jewish peoples, we see commonality in shared goals and values of resistance and perseverance in our dark hours of the early 20th century. Our first example will be from the 1930s. 40 Days on Musadagh is a well-known book written by Austrian-Bohemian Jew Franz Werfel, recalling the horrors of the Armenian genocide on Mount Musadagh, located on the Mediterranean Sea southwest of ancient Antioch, present-day Turkey. Musadagh is the image of strong-willed resistance for Armenians, and we will see Jews as well. Musadagh is one of 4 sites where Armenians organized a defense of their community against the deportation edicts issued by the Young Turk regime beginning in April 1915. By the time the Armenians of the 6 villages surrounding the base of Musadagh were instructed to flee their homes, the inhabitants knew their fate would ultimately be death. They chose life and retreated up the mountain, defying the evacuation orders of the Ottoman Turks. Werfel's book became popular in Jewish ghettos as it was perceived by many to demonstrate uprising, resistance, and pursuits of one true's identity when faced with persecution. Ghettos such as Vilna, Bialystok, Warsaw, and others brought this book to life about the Armenian opposition as they saw similar patterns emerging within their ghettos. Additionally, for Jews living in the British Mandate of Palestine, Musadagh set the atmosphere for protecting the Jewish people, particularly with the thought of retreating to Mount Carmel. Known as the Musadagh Plan, they set out actions in order to hold out to 3 to 4 months against the threat of Nazi invasion. Mary Batz, one of the leaders of the Jewish militias who had read the book, stated that the community wished to, quote, turn Carmel into the Musadagh of Palestinian Jewry. We put our faith in the power of the Jewish Musadagh, unquote. On an individual level, parallels between 2 assassins, Shalom Schwarzbord and Solomon Tehlerian, are also worth touching on. First, Solomon Tehlerian, a young student from Western Armenia whose large family was annihilated by Ottoman forces at the beginning of their atrocities against Armenians. He would bring partial and much-needed justice to his nation by assassinating Talat Pasha, the architect of the genocide in Germany in 1921. Shalom Schwarzbord was a young Jewish man whose family, like Tehlerian's, was destroyed by Ukrainian statesman Simon Petliura's pogroms during the Russian Civil War. Schwarzbord assassinated Petliura and was tried and acquitted on the basis of mental instability in France in 1927. These were 2 young men, an Armenian and a Jew, seeking justice for their families and nations whom had been systematically murdered by genocidal governments. Both trials, held in Berlin and Paris, eventually helped cement the significance of international law that seeks today to hold individual countries to account for the oppression of minorities. Dr. Raphael Lemkin, a Jewish law student from Poland, would push for an international law punishing the wholesale annihilation of groups of people motivated by and focusing on the recurring cases of men taking revenge into their own hands. Later, Dr. Raphael Lemkin's perseverance and pursuits would lead him to coin the term genocide in 1944. Lemkin realized that the sequence of killing a group of people has been an event seen too many times in history, triggering him to lead the campaign to have genocide recognized and codified as an international crime. Emil Ludwig, a German of Jewish descent, wrote after following the same trials of Schwarzbord and Tehlirian that, quote, "Only when a society of nations has organized itself as the protector of international order will no Armenian killer remain unpunished because no Turkish pasha has the right to send a nation into the desert." Ludwig's writings would be burned in March 1933 when German students brought into action the torchings of books that went against the ideology of Nazism. Robert Kempner, a German lawyer of Jewish descent, was also present at Jan Tehlirian's trial. This man of great intellect would play a significant role in the Bürgerputsch, eager to remove the Nazi presence within the German parliament. Unsuccessful, Kempner would be sent to a concentration camp for 2 months, eventually seeking refuge in the United States, ultimately returning to Germany as a prosecutor taking part in the Nuremberg trials. Armin Regner was a Red Cross medic stationed in the Ottoman Empire during the atrocities committed against the Armenians. Wegner is famous for smuggling photos and textual documentations of the crimes being committed not only by Turks, but by Germans as well. Wegner would write an open letter during the month of April 1933 criticizing the act of persecution. The 6-page letter titled "For Germany" constituted a detailed text on the historic Jewish people and their contribution to human civilization, and to Germany in particular. It warned that the anti-Semitic campaign was bound to bring disgrace upon the German people. Wegner was arrested by the Gestapo and thrown into Columbia House, where he was tortured and brutalized until he lost consciousness. He suffered incarceration in 7 Nazi concentration camps and prisons before escaping to Italy. During the time of the Holocaust, many Armenians helped Jews flee persecution, as their families had experienced 20 years before. Today, 13 Armenians are listed as being part of Yad Vashem's Righteous Among Nations. The motives of these brave Armenians have always tied back to one statement. Each one has faced persecution in the early 20th century by Turks. Arajeretyan took investments out of his holdings to cover clinic costs and protected the lives of 400 Jews until the liberation in Budapest in 1945 January. For 2 years, while hidden Jews were hunted, the Tashyan children of Crimea would purposely set an alarm when Nazis approached, hiding young Anatoly and Rita in various places in their house. Ashken Agopian, finding out her dear friend Olga and her toddler and baby daughters were deported to a ghetto in Ukraine, would willingly risk her life to provide them with food and diapers, eventually hiding them for 18 months in her building's coal cellar. These Armenians held on to their collective memories and experiences, differentiating between selflessness and bravery in the face of conflict in order to save souls. I have dialogued with Turks in Turkey and elsewhere who have expressed remorse for what happened to my family, who they never knew, nor were responsible for their murders during the time of the genocide. When I walk into Yad Vashem every day, I witness German groups sharing the sense of regret over actions taken by their people against Jews. There is a desire to reconcile and move forward, but our governments are not willing to do so right now. Here at Hebrew University, where we build upon the wisdom of the past, during this memorial where we remember the Armenian Genocide in the wake of Holocaust Remembrance Day, let us hear inspirational voices and move our people forward. Through shared experiences, emotions, and values of our peoples, a difference can be generated to prevent the horrors of inaction and injustice. Voice must be given to the lessons of the past in order to protect the future of my people, my Israeli state, and that of humanity. Thank you.
Many thanks, Irina. Our next speaker is Miss Anna Kapatyan. She's an Armenian journalist based in Prague and PhD candidate at the city's Charles University. She's the co-founder of the Caucasus Eastern Europe Information Center, the co-founder and publisher of the Armenian European magazine, and the editor-in-chief of its online news portal. She has worked for the American United Press International news agencies, the RFE/RL broadcasting company, as well as numerous Armenian and international media outlets. Her current research is focused on Czech-Armenian cultural, socio-political, and historical relations since the end of the 19th century. Today she will introduce Czech traveler and writer Harald Hansa and his book The Horrors of the East, about the Armenian Genocide.
Thank you. Dear audience, good evening. It's really a true honor and privilege to be here at this evening, and my sincere thanks to all the organizers. My today's speech is part of my efforts in placing Czech writer Karel Hansa on the world's list of primary sources on the Armenian Genocide as an eyewitness account. Let me start with a parallel. Czech writer Karel Hansa was born in Vienna and wrote his book Horrors of the East in Prague. Meanwhile, Franz Werfel was born in the same year as Hansa in Prague and wrote his world-famous 40 Days in Vienna. Hansa wrote his book after he saw the Armenian orphans in Syria in 1922. Werfel also wrote his book after he saw the Armenian disabled and hungry orphans weaving carpets in Syria 7 years later. Both gentlemen contacted the Armenian Mkhitarist congregation in Vienna for further information and research, and both of them lectured to raise awareness about the issue. Both books were later forbidden by the Nazi regime. Without talking about literary value of Werfel's book, of course, for today's is out of any competition or comparison, the difference between the two authors is that Hansa worked very quickly to leave an eyewitness account on the consequences of the Armenian Genocide, coupled with historical documents, whilst Werfel worked lengthy months researching the historical events to write a feature story, a novel, about the real events. The other, yet bigger difference is Werfel's book is world famous, translated in many languages, whilst Hansa's book is only known in specialist circles and is translated only into Armenian, and I very much hope that I'll publish it this week. It was around a century ago, at the beginning of summer in 1922, when a 32-year-old Czechoslovak forester started a journey from Prague. The road from Constantinople to Constantinople had no alternative in his mind. World War I had just ended. The further to the east he traveled, the further the achieved peace defied logic. The territorial redrawing of Europe and the Middle East was not completed yet, and for many the war was not over. Hansa claimed that he could feel the disaster awaiting Smyrna in the autumn of 1922. Were it not for the disagreements and misunderstandings in his love affairs, he would not have embarked on the half-year journey that would radically change the further course of his life and professional occupation. He started signing Karel Hansa, traveler and writer. Czech travelogues are rich in prominent names, but Karel Hansa stands among them in a unique manner. His first book, Hrůzy východu, The Horrors of the East, is in fact a historical document on the Armenian Genocide in the Ottoman Empire, which began with the massacres at the end of the 19th century and lasted until 1923. The book is not only the first text in Czech on the Armenian Genocide, but also an eyewitness account on its aftermath and the fate of genocide survivors. His second book, The Wanderings in the Orient and the Harems in the Light of Truth, published after the first one, gives details on the journey, and one can clearly follow the maturing of Hansa's consciousness and how he transformed and heretofore inconspicuous traveler became just a writer. Everything Hansa witnessed exemplified new knowledge for him rather than simply new impressions. It was on the streets of Aleppo that Hansa became witness to orphaned Christian children who were wandering around in the streets and fighting with stray dogs over bites to eat. In Aleppo, he started helping Near East Relief, a notable American humanitarian organization that, amongst other activities, was trying to save the orphans from slavery, forced Islamization, simply death, by finding and transferring them from Turkish-controlled regions to the orphanages founded in Syria and Lebanon. Hansa regularly participated in the planned operations to meet several hundred orphans from Urfa and Harput in the border settlement Jarabulus for their subsequent move to Aleppo. This gave him the opportunity to see the camps of the displaced, to hear their stories, witness the caravans of Armenian orphans, photograph them, and wholly comprehend the scale of the tragedy. He stayed several days in Beirut before traveling back to Prague. Women broken by suffering, need, and pain came to his room and told the unknown stranger about their boundless tragedy. Here is a quote. They spoke about the disasters they lived through. They were trembling, but they did not cry. There were no tears left in their empty eyelids because life was completely extinguished in them. Their lips did not lie, and their condition was not living testimony to the tragedy of their people and an indictment of the present civilized West. Shortly after he returned to Prague, he opened Hansův fond pro arménské sirotky, Hansa Fund for the Armenian orphans within the Red Cross of Czechoslovakia. He began to organize various events and set aside money for the foundation. He was lecturing across the country. Hansa's lectures were very useful in terms of raising awareness, and they were not merely abstract, as he was displaying 175 photos and slides as evidence. The Czech lands were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was the Ottoman Empire's ally. Thus, the Czech society was not aware because they were under Turkish agenda propaganda. Very soon, Hansa set about writing the story he had witnessed himself, alongside those which survivors of the genocide had told him. He also made extensive use of the documents in his possession, including the treatment of Armenians in the Ottoman Empire, report published in the British Parliamentary Blue Book series in 1916 by Arnold Toynbee and Joyce Bryce. Thus, the Horrors of the East became a quasi-Czech version of existing British Blue Book, and the first documented instance of this fact being presented to the Czech society in their own language. Additionally, he expressed the lessons and reasons for the mass deportations. Several times, the author clearly stated and emphasized that an entire nation has been displayed to be killed, that an ancient Christian nation had been annihilated in the East, in its cradle and its indigenous homeland, and that is why it is necessary to reach out to those who had been miraculously saved. Josef Scheffel, an owner of a publishing house, had agreed to publish the book through his own financial means. Its cover ended up being the front side of a postcard, the author of which was Sergei Solomko, a painter and designer from St. Petersburg, Russia. The postcard was published under the title Martyred Peoples in Paris. Karl Hansa, who himself went through the devastations of World War I and was wounded, only just escaping amputation of his right arm, could assess the realities very well, differentiating where military operations or hostilities end and massacres begin. This is what he wrote. Turkish gendarmes and soldiers and Kurds, always willing and faithful allies of Turks, committed atrocities that the pen refuses to write about. The ink freezes. There was no term genocide at the time Hansa was writing his book, so he used the word znitchit, annihilate, to describe the fact. The Horrors of the East is a factually supported indictment of the Ottoman Empire based on eyewitness evidence. Hansa Fund existed until the Nazi occupation of Czechoslovakia. It was confiscated by occupying forces alongside the whole property of the Red Cross. Hansa's book, as I mentioned, was indexed by the Germans and removed from all the libraries. Some Armenians living in Czechoslovakia merely kept the Horrors of the East as a relic in their houses. After Karl Hansa's death in 1967, his apartment was wholly robbed and burgled. Everything disappeared, this car as well. Hansa's entire archive had disappeared, including the author's pride, the thousands of photographs and slides Hansa had taken during his trips. The facsimile edition of the book, published in Prague in 2006 through the initiative of Armenian European magazine Orer, invaluably awakened interest in Hansa's work amongst academic circles. Hansa had the gift of influencing the people and public opinion decades after his death. Karl Hansa and his book played a pivotal role in the discussion of the Chamber of Deputies of the Czech Republic, Poslanecká sněmovna, to officially recognize and condemn the Armenian Genocide in 2017, as well as the Senate's similar resolution in 2020. So Hansa had a key role in shaping Czech society's affirmations of and political thoughts surrounding the issue of the Armenian Genocide. In the end, how much money had Hansa collected for his fund? The question now, after almost 100 years, is only interesting from one point of view. To what extent was he able to present and convey to the Czechs and Slovaks, who had become independent and had regained their national dignity after the collapse of Austro-Hungarian Empire, the pain of a people who had lost almost everything as a result of the collapse of yet another empire, the Ottoman one, through his books and lectures. Now we can state that the book, The Horrors of the East, itself grew to become a Hansa Fund, the merits and legacy of which are significantly noticeable today. Thank you for your attention.
We will now be moving to the readings of two poems from the new anthology in Hebrew, The Voice of Thy Brother Blood, edited by Maya Valentine, Tel Aviv 2021. So the first poem is by Ovanas Tomanyan, Armenian Grief. Tomanyan was born in 1869 in the Armenian town of the Sakh in the Russian Empire. He was a celebrated poet and author, and he was also the head of the Caucasian Armenian Poet and Author Society. He died at 1923. So I'm very honored to present this in three languages. So the first one, or by the order I'm giving, is Serena Bosch again, please, Serena. And then we be followed by Maya Valentine in Hebrew, and concluded in English by Professor Reuven Amitai. So please, Serena.
Hayot svishtem anhun midzov, chavar midzov anhakin, en sev zovum darabelov, lore dalis im hokin. Mer zairatskod zare selinum, minchev yergin kabudag, mer toknad suzvum, ichnum, tebi chorkeren anhadag. Voch hadagen ekednum an verch, voch hasnum yerginkin. Hayot svishtem medzo vimech, darabume im hokin.
יגון ארמני. היגון הארמני הוא ים ללא חוף, תהום רבה של מים. נשמתי שוחה אבלה במרחב עצום ושחור זה. לעתים היא מפזזת, כעוסה, ומחפשת את החוף, כחול ורגוע. היכן שלפעמים היא צוללת לעומק מוטשת, מחפשת מנוחה בל תשוער, אך לעולם לא תגיע לקרקעית אותו הים, לעולם לא תגיע אל החוף. ביגון הארמני, במרחב השחור, נשמתי חיה ומתאבלת.
Armenian grief. The Armenian grief is a shoreless sea, an enormous abyss of water. My soul swims mournfully on this huge and black expanse. It prances at times enraged and looks for the shore, blue and serene, where sometimes it wearily dives deeply, looking for fathomless rest. But it will never reach the bottom of the sea. It will never reach the shore. In the Armenian grief on the black expanse, my soul lives and mourns.
Thank you. Our next song by Keith Garbian, The Plum Tree. It was originally written in English. Garbian was born in Mumbai in 1943. Armenian father, and his mother was Anglo-Indian. He migrated with his family in 1961 to Canada. I want to present and reintroduce, please. Professor Reuven Amitai will read in English, followed by Maya Valentine reading in Hebrew.
Maybe I should just say beforehand that the content of this poem, perhaps some might find a little difficult, but I think it tells it like it is, as they say. The plum tree, its fruit bent low with sweetness, your mother's life bent and broken. Lake Van, so blue with sadness, your mother's lips morning blue. Butchers and tanners with clubs and cleavers, your mother screaming as an axe smashes doors. The moon gliding softly in a silver loop, your mother's heart ripped in a blackened country. The plum tree stands where it always stood, and your mother's blood feeding its root.
עץ השזיף. עץ השזיף, פריו המתוק כפוף. חיי אמך כפופים ושבורים. ימת ון כה כחולה מעצב. שפתי אמך אבלות כחולות. קצבים ומעבדי אורות בעלות ובסכיני קצבים. אמך צורחת כשגרזן מנתץ דלתות. הירח גולש ברכות בלולאה כסופה, לב אמך נקרע לגזרים בארץ משחירה. עץ השזיף עומד היכן שתמיד עמד, ודם אמך מזין את שורשיו.
Thank you. As our evening is drawing to a close, let me invite, please, Mr. Tsulag Momadjian, Honorary Consul of the Republic of Armenia in Jerusalem, who for many years has been a steadfast supporter of our program in Armenian Studies and this annual memorial evening. I am thus particularly happy to invite him to convey the concluding remarks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just to sum up this important evening in the history of relationships between the Hebrew University and the local Armenian community. 25 years ago, with Professor Michael Stone, who is present with us, we started commemorating the Armenian Genocide at the Hebrew University with much complaints from the Turkish embassy in Tel Aviv, as Professor Menachem Magidor, the president of the university at the time, related to me. Today, with the endless efforts of Professor Ruben Amitai, this tradition is continuing. The Armenian Church in Jerusalem has always had a good relationship with the Hebrew University. The late Patriarch Archbishop Torko Manukyan was attending this event every year without interruption until he was unable to walk on his own. Before him, it was Archbishop Shaheh Ajemian, the Chancellor of the Armenian Patriarchate in Jerusalem, who initiated sending the seminary students to the Hebrew University for higher education. Archbishop Shaheh Ajemian created the golden age of culture at the Armenian Seminary in Jerusalem and the golden age of church-state relationships. I would also like to express my thanks to Professor Barak Medina, Rector of the Hebrew University. My dear friend, His Excellency Dr. Arman Hakopian, Ambassador of the Republic of Armenia. Mr. Kevork Nalbandian, the lecturers of this evening, Dr. Amit Kult and Ms. Anna Karapetyan. I would also like to thank all the other participants, all the crowd who is with us, and others who are listening and seeing us tonight. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Momadjian. Let me just finish by thanking the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel School for Advanced Studies in the Humanities, its director, Professor Daniel Schwartz, and the administrative team led by Ina Dostov. My colleagues, of course, from the Hebrew University, Professor Ruben Amitai, Professor Michael Stone, Professor Donna Shalev, I can't see Donna, she has to rush, yeah. Mr. Yoav Lev on the photography, of course, Dr. Yakir Paz, and for their advice and support and for everything. I also want to thank the musicians, the singers, and finally all of you who joined us this evening. Have a very, very good night. Thank you very much.
reception upstairs. Maybe just go up and make sure of that.
Yeah, the reception is upstairs. Thank you.